Stop, right now, before you open that browser tab, before you add another bottle of probiotics to your cart, before you spend another $60, maybe $80 this month on gut health supplements that may or may not be doing anything at all. I need you to look at something. This plant, the one growing through the cracks in your driveway, the one you've been pulling out of your garden and throwing in the trash for years, this plant contains more beneficial compounds for your gut microbiome than a $60 bottle of probiotic capsules sitting behind a pharmacy counter. And I don't mean that loosely. I don't mean it the way wellness influencers throw around words like superfood. I mean it in a measurable, documented, peer-reviewed way that we are going to go through together, step by step, in this video. My name is Hostname, and for the last several years, I've been obsessed with one question: what did people do for their digestion before there was a supplement industry? Before there were capsules and powders and 30-day supply bottles? Because humans have had guts for a very long time, and the supplement industry has existed for a very short time. So what filled that gap? The answer, in a huge number of cultures across thousands of years, was plants exactly like this one. This is Purslane, and by the end of this video, you're going to understand why it grows everywhere, how to grow a season's supply in a single bucket for about $12, and exactly how to eat it in a way that makes it more effective than almost anything you can buy. Let's go. Portulaca oleracea, that's the Latin name. But across the world for thousands of years, it's just been called food. In Persian medicine, one of the oldest continuous medical traditions on earth, purslane was prescribed specifically for digestive complaints, for the lining of the stomach, for what we'd now call gut inflammation. In traditional Chinese medicine, it's called ma qi xian, horsetooth amaranth, and it's been in continuous use for over 2,000 years, specifically for gastrointestinal health, intestinal infections, and reducing what practitioners described as damp heat in the digestive tract. In ancient Greece, Dioscorides, writing in the 1st century AD, listed purslane as a remedy for stomach disorders, intestinal ulcers, and the kind of chronic digestive discomfort that would today have someone Googling best probiotic for bloating. Today, purslane is still a staple ingredient in Turkish cuisine and Mexican cooking, where it's called verdolagas in Greek salads and Lebanese meze. Entire populations have been eating this plant as a regular part of their diet, continuously, for longer than Western medicine has existed as a concept. And yet in North America we pull it out of the ground and throw it away. Look at this plant carefully. The stems are thick and slightly translucent, reddish at the base, green toward the tips. The leaves are small, oval, paddle-shaped, succulent-like. They're slightly thick, slightly waxy, and when you break one open, you'll notice something. It's almost juicy inside. There's a gel-like quality to it. That gel, that's what we need to talk about, because that's one of the main reasons this plant does what it does for your gut. But first, let me show you exactly what's inside this plant, because the science here is genuinely remarkable. Let's start with the headline number because it legitimately surprised me when I first looked into it. Purslane contains approximately 300 to 400 milligrams of alpha-linolenic acid, that's ALA, the plant-based omega-3 fatty acid, per 100 grams of fresh weight. That actually makes it the highest known source of omega-3s among all leafy green vegetables. Higher than spinach, higher than kale, higher than arugula. It's not even close. Now, why does that matter for gut health specifically? Because most people, think of omega-3s as a heart or brain supplement, and yeah, they do tremendous work in those systems, but the gut wall is one of the most actively inflamed tissues in the human body when things go wrong. And omega-3 fatty acids are among the most well-documented anti-inflammatory compounds we know of. When your gut lining is chronically inflamed, which is the underlying condition behind leaky gut, IBS, Crohn's, disease flares, and just general digestive sensitivity, omega-3 fatty acids work to modulate the inflammatory response at the cellular level. They don't just mask symptoms, they interact with the prostaglandin pathways that determine whether your gut wall stays in a state of defense or repair. Multiple studies, including a 2022 review published in the journal Nutrients, have confirmed that ALA-rich diets are associated with measurably reduced intestinal inflammation markers, and purslane delivers that ALA fresh, bioavailable, alongside a matrix of other compounds that we now know work synergistically. That's something a fish oil capsule or a flaxseed powder just can't fully replicate, the whole food matrix effect. Now, let's talk about that gel I mentioned, because this is where purslane really separates itself from every supplement on the market. That gel-like quality inside purslane stems and leaves is called mucilage. It's a class of polysaccharides, basically complex carbohydrates. that, when they come into contact with water in your digestive tract, form a thick, viscous, almost slippery coating. Think of it this way. Your intestinal lining is a surface, and that surface, in most modern people eating processed food, and under chronic stress, is rougher than it should be, inflamed, partially compromised. The tight junctions between intestinal cells, which are supposed to allow only fully digested nutrients through, become looser than they should be. That's the condition increasingly referred to as increased intestinal permeability. Mucilage acts as a temporary mechanical barrier and a soothing coating over that surface. It physically protects the gut wall from irritants. It slows the movement of food through the digestive tract, which allows more complete absorption of nutrients. And, critically, it acts as a substrate, a food source, for specific strains of beneficial gut bacteria. This is the difference between a prebiotic and a probiotic, and it's worth making sure we're all clear on it. A probiotic supplement introduces bacteria into your digestive system. You're consuming live bacterial cultures, usually lactobacillus or bifidobacterium strains, and hoping they survive the journey through your stomach acid, successfully colonize your gut, and begin reproducing. Research on this is complicated. The survival rates of probiotic bacteria through stomach acid are highly variable. Colonization rates in clinical studies are often modest. And the bacterial strains in most commercial supplements were selected partly for stability and shelf life, not exclusively for optimal human gut colonization. A prebiotic, by contrast, feeds the bacteria that are already there. Your gut already contains trillions of microorganisms. The community that is, in a healthy person, far more diverse and well-established than anything you could introduce from a capsule. Prebiotic fiber is the food that bacterial community thrives on, and Purslane is extraordinarily rich in prebiotic fiber. The mucilage polysaccharides are fermented by gut bacteria to produce short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate, which are, in the current research literature, considered among the most important compounds for gut health we've ever identified. Butyrate is the primary fuel source for colonocytes, the cells that line your large intestine. When colonocytes are well fed with butyrate, they maintain tight junction integrity, they regulate immune response in the gut wall, and they suppress inflammatory signaling. Low butyrate production is now associated with a remarkable range of conditions: ulcerative colitis, colorectal cancer risk, IBS, and, through the gut-brain axis, anxiety, depression, and cognitive fog. The bacteria that produce butyrate most efficiently are called firmicutes, particularly species like Faecalibacterium prausnitzii and Roseburia intestinalis. These are among the most researched beneficial bacteria in the current microbiome literature, and the prebiotic fibers in Purslane, mucilage polysaccharides and flavonoids, specifically support their growth. I want to be clear about something here, because I believe in intellectual honesty above all else in this space. The microbiome research on Purslane specifically, as a single food intervention, is still developing. We have very strong mechanistic evidence. We understand the compounds. We understand how they interact with gut physiology. We can trace the pathways. We have substantial epidemiological data from populations that eat Purslane regularly showing lower rates of digestive disorders. And we have robust clinical evidence on the specific compounds, ALA omega-3s, mucilage polysaccharides, prebiotic fiber, studied both in isolation and in other whole food contexts. What we don't have yet is a large-scale, randomized, controlled trial that puts Purslane in a capsule, gives it to 1,000 people with IBS, and measures outcomes at 12 months. That study hasn't been funded because, and we'll come back to this, there's no financial incentive to fund it. But the convergence of mechanisms, traditional use data, and compound-level research is, in my view, compelling. And it's why cultures that never talk to each other, Persians, Chinese, Greeks, Mexicans, all independently arrived at this plant for the same category of use. One more compound worth naming. Purslane contains significant levels of glutathione, one of the most powerful antioxidants produced by the human body, and one of the few foods that contains meaningful amounts in bioavailable form. Oxidative stress in the gut lining is a major driver of chronic inflammation, and glutathione directly addresses that. It also contains melatonin, yes, the sleep hormone, in concentrations that are, per gram, among the highest found in any plant food. The gut produces more melatonin than the brain, and gut-produced melatonin plays a significant role in regulating intestinal motility and the gut-brain axis. This is not a compound you'll find in your probiotic supplement. The picture that emerges from Purslane's nutritional profile is not one compound doing one thing. It's a suite of compounds that collectively address the gut from multiple angles simultaneously. Anti-inflammatory via omega-3s, protective via mucilage, prebiotic via polysaccharides, antioxidant via glutathione, motility supporting via melatonin, and mineral-rich for the enzymatic processes that run the whole system. That's not a supplement. That's a food. And it grows in your driveway. Alright, here's where this gets practical. You do not need a garden. You do not need a yard. You do not need to live anywhere special or have any particular skill set. If you've ever kept a houseplant alive for more than 3 months, you can do this. What I'm going to show you is how to set up a Purslane growing system in a single bucket that will supply you with fresh Purslane, harvestable every week for the entire growing season, and potentially year-round if you bring it indoors. Let's go through the setup, step by step. Step 1. The container. You need a container that's at least 8 to 12 inches deep and has drainage holes at the bottom. That's it. You can use a 5-gallon bucket from any hardware store, usually $2 to $4. You can use a large plastic tub, a window box, a ceramic pot you already own. Purslane is not particular about containers, it just needs depth for root development and drainage, so roots don't sit in standing water. Drill or punch 4 to 6 holes in the bottom if there aren't any already. Done. Step 2. The soil mix. Purslane is a plant that evolved in disturbed, low-nutrient environments. It does not want rich, heavily amended garden soil. What it wants is fast-draining, somewhat lean-growing medium. The best mix I've found, 70% standard potting mix, 30% coarse sand or perlite. The sand or perlite creates the drainage that Purslane's roots prefer and mimics the disturbed soil environments where it naturally thrives. Fill your container to within 2 inches of the top. That gap matters. It gives you watering room and prevents soil from washing out. Cost for a full container, a bag of basic potting mix runs $4 to $6. A small bag of perlite or sand runs another $2 to $3. Total soil investment, $6 to $8. Step 3. Planting. You have 2 options here. Option A. Seeds. Purslane seeds are tiny, almost dust-like, but they germinate readily and quickly. You can find them in garden centers or online for $2 to $4 a packet. To plant from seed, simply scatter them lightly across the soil surface, press them gently into contact with the soil. Don't bury them, they need light to germinate, and mist the surface with water. Germination takes 5 to 10 days in warm weather. Once seedlings are an inch tall, thin them to about 4 inches apart. Option B. Cuttings. If Purslane grows wild in your area, and in most of North America it does, you can take cuttings directly from wild plants. Snip 3 to 4 inch stem sections, strip the lower leaves, and press them into moist soil. Purslane roots from cuttings with remarkable ease, often within a week. This method costs nothing. Step 4. Sunlight. Purslane prefers full sun. 6 or more hours per day is ideal. But you know it's actually pretty tolerant of partial shade, especially if it gets morning sun with some afternoon shade, which can slow it down just enough to keep it manageable in a container. A south-facing patio, a bright window, or a balcony that gets midday light. All of those work well. If you're growing indoors in low light, a basic grow light on a 12-hour cycle will keep the plant going, though growth will be slower than in full outdoor sun. Step 5. Watering. This is where honestly most people tend to overthink it. Purslane is a succulent. It stores water in its leaves and stems, so it tolerates drought really well. Overwatering is a bigger risk than not watering enough. Water when the top inch of soil feels dry. In hot summer weather, that might mean every other day. In milder conditions, every 3 to 4 days is fine. In winter, indoors, once a week may be plenty. The cardinal rule, never let it sit in standing water. Make sure to empty the saucer under your container after watering if water pools there. Step 6. The harvest cycle. This is where it gets genuinely exciting because Purslane is one of the most productive container plants you can grow. Purslane reaches harvestable size, that's 6 to 8 inches of stem growth, in roughly 3 to 4 weeks from seed or cutting. Once it's established, you harvest using what's called the cut and come again method. Just snip the top 2 to 3 inches of each stem with scissors or a sharp knife, leaving the lower portion of the plant intact. Within 7 to 10 days in warm weather, the plant has regrown to harvestable size again. You can keep this harvest cycle going continuously for the entire growing season. A single 12-inch container, if you manage it well, will produce enough purslane for daily use. That's roughly a half cup to 1 cup of fresh plant material per day, all season long. Let's talk cost for a second. Total setup cost. Container, $2 to $4. Soil and perlite, $6 to $8. Seeds or cuttings, $0 to $4. So, total, $8 to $14 as a one-time investment. After that, your only ongoing cost is water, which, if you're already paying a water bill, really rounds to 0. 10 minutes of maintenance per week. Seriously, that's not an exaggeration. Watering takes about 2 minutes, harvesting takes 5, and a quick check for any issues takes 3. That's your weekly time commitment. Alright, let's talk about how to actually eat this, because honestly, growing it doesn't do anything for you if you're not using it in a way that fits into your life and is sustainable. There are 3 main ways I use purslane for gut health specifically, and I'll walk you through each one. First, wash it thoroughly, especially if it came from wild growth near pavement or areas that may have been treated with herbicides. Give it a good rinse, let it dry on a clean towel, or spin it in a salad spinner. Method 1. Raw, in salads. This is the simplest and, from a mucilage preservation standpoint, probably the most effective method for gut health specifically. Heat degrades mucilage. Raw purslane preserves it. Purslane has a mild, slightly lemony, slightly salty flavor. The texture is crisp and succulent. It works exceptionally well with cucumber, tomato, olive oil, and lemon, which is basically a simplified version of how it's eaten across the Middle East and Mediterranean. The daily amount I recommend, based on the research on therapeutic prebiotic fiber intake, is around 100 grams of fresh purslane per day. That's roughly 2 large handfuls. You can work up to that amount. Start with 1 handful if purslane is new to your diet, because the prebiotic fiber can cause some initial gas and bloating as your gut microbiome adjusts. This is normal, and usually resolves within 1 to 2 weeks. Method 2. Smoothie addition. Raw purslane blends smoothly, and the flavor is mild enough to be completely masked by fruit. The mucilage actually creates a slightly thicker, silkier texture in a smoothie, which honestly, some people really enjoy. The benefit of the smoothie method is speed. You're not doing any prep work at all. Just grab a handful, toss it in with whatever you're blending, and you're done. All the gut health compounds are preserved, all the mucilage is intact, and actually released more effectively by blending than by chewing whole leaves. This is the method I use most often because, seriously, it takes under 2 minutes and the barrier to entry is 0. Method 3. Lacto-fermentation. This method is for those who want to go a layer deeper. Lacto-fermenting purslane does 2 things that are genuinely additive from a gut health perspective. First, it creates live cultures, the naturally occurring lactobacillus bacteria on the surface of purslane, just like on cabbage and sauerkraut, or on cucumbers in traditional pickles, ferment the plant's natural sugars, producing lactic acid and, in the process, multiplying into a concentration of live probiotic bacteria that is measurably higher than most commercial probiotic capsules. Second, the fermentation process pre-digests some of the plant's polysaccharides, making them more immediately bioavailable, and creates additional beneficial metabolites, B vitamins, enzymes, novel short-chain fatty acids, that just weren't present in the raw plant. The process is simple. Pack washed purslane into a mason jar. Make a brine of 1 teaspoon of non-iodized salt per cup of water. Iodine inhibits fermentation. Pour the brine over the purslane, pressing it down so it's fully submerged. Put a loose lid on the jar or a fermentation weight to keep the plant below the brine surface. Leave it at room temperature, ideally 65 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, for 3 to 7 days. You'll see bubbles form. That's the fermentation working. Taste it starting on day 3. When it's pleasantly sour, it's ready. Refrigerate and use within 2 to 3 weeks. 2 tablespoons of fermented purslane per day is enough to deliver meaningful live culture content. Combined with fresh raw purslane for the prebiotic and mucilage benefits, you're working the probiotic and prebiotic angles simultaneously. The replacement math. Let me give you the numbers because this is where the picture becomes impossible to argue with. A typical comprehensive gut health stack: probiotics, prebiotics, omega-3s, and a gut lining product runs between $120 and $195 per month. That's $1,440 to $2,340 per year. One bucket of Purslane, after the initial $12 setup, costs you nothing. The plant regrows. You harvest. You eat. You repeat. Fresh Purslane stores well in the refrigerator for up to 5 days. Wrap it loosely in a slightly damp paper towel and store in a produce bag or container in the crisper drawer. Don't wash it until just before use. Excess moisture accelerates deterioration. For longer storage, Purslane can be blanched for 30 seconds in boiling water, shocked in ice water, and frozen. Frozen Purslane loses its texture for fresh applications, but works perfectly in smoothies and cooked dishes. This lets you build a stockpile from peak season harvest to use through winter. I want to take a few minutes to talk about something that I think is important context for everything we've covered today. Purslane has been used medicinally for over 2,000 years across multiple continents. The science on its key compounds is solid. It grows prolifically, almost everywhere, with minimal effort and zero cost. It is, by any reasonable measure, one of the most accessible and effective foods you can add to a gut health protocol. So why haven't you heard about it? Because there is no money in Purslane. Let me explain what I mean by that precisely, because I'm not trying to be dramatic or conspiratorial. I'm describing a straightforward economic reality. The supplement industry operates on a model that requires something to sell. To sell something, you need to be able to produce it in a form that can be packaged, branded, distributed, and marked up. You need a product with a patent, or at least a proprietary process, a trademark strain name, a branded formulation that prevents competitors from simply copying it. Purslane can't be patented. It's a wild plant. Anyone can grow it. Anyone can harvest it. Anyone can eat it. There is no intellectual property to protect. There is no supply chain to control. There is no barrier to entry that would allow a company to charge $60 a month for what grows freely in every state in the country. This creates a strange situation in the information environment around health. The research that gets funded tends to be the research with commercial applications. A pharmaceutical company or supplement manufacturer funds studies on their product because positive results translate into sales. A wild weed with no commercial pathway has no one paying for large-scale clinical trials, for marketing budgets, for the kind of sustained media presence that would make it a household name. It's not a conspiracy. It's just incentive structures. Money flows toward proprietary products. Information follows money. And plants like Purslane exist in a kind of institutional blind spot, well documented in historical medicine, well supported at the mechanistic level, used daily by hundreds of millions of people in other parts of the world, but functionally invisible in the North American supplement conversation. I want to be careful here, because I'm not telling you that all supplements are useless. Some are very useful. Some people have specific deficiencies or medical conditions where targeted supplementation makes real sense, and they should work with their healthcare provider on that. If you have serious gastrointestinal disease, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, celiac, you need medical supervision, not a YouTube video. What I am saying is that the default assumption, that a packaged product in a bottle is more legitimate, more effective, or more medically serious than a fresh plant, is not supported by the evidence. It's supported by marketing. And those are very different things. The populations with the best documented gut health outcomes in the world, the blue zones, the traditional Mediterranean cultures, the communities whose microbiome diversity researchers have held up as benchmarks, eat tremendous amounts of wild, foraged, and traditionally cultivated plants, not capsules, plants. Purslane is one of those plants. It's been one of those plants for longer than our entire current medical paradigm has existed. There's something I find genuinely moving about this, and I want to share it before I wrap up. When you grow Purslane in your backyard or on your balcony, you're participating in something that connects you to Persian physicians writing in the 9th century, to Greek herbalists in the 1st century, to Mexican grandmothers cooking verdolagas with pork, to Chinese medicine practitioners treating dysentery with machi xian. You're doing the same thing they were doing. The plant hasn't changed. The human gut hasn't changed. The relationship between them hasn't changed. What's changed is that we decided, at some point in the 20th century, to package that relationship into a capsule and charge $60 a month for a pale imitation of it. You don't have to participate in that. That's the point. One bucket, $12, 10 minutes a week. A daily handful of a plant that cultures across the world have trusted for millennia. That's the entire system. Now, I want to hear from you. If you've grown purslane before, if you've eaten it, if it grows wild in your garden and you've been pulling it out for years without realizing what you had, leave a comment. I read every single one. If you try the bucket setup from this video, I want to know. Tell me where you are, what your setup looks like, and, most importantly, tell me what happens when you start eating it consistently. Come back in 30 days and tell me how you feel. Tell me what changed. The comments section of this video over time is going to become a real-world data set of people who tried this and reported results. That's more valuable than any study I can cite because it's your experience, with your gut, in your life. If this video helped you, share it with one person. Specifically, think of one person in your life who is spending money every month on gut health supplements that may not be working. Share this video with them. That's the only ask. Subscribe if you're not already. We go deep on plants like this regularly, the ones that work, the ones that have always worked, the ones that fall outside the commercial conversation, for exactly the reasons we talked about today. One plant, one bucket, 2,000 years of evidence. I'll see you in the next one.